we are going to have a very important sharing session. That is a roundtable session for this afternoon's conference. And now I would like to give the floor to the panelists of this roundtable meeting and how blockchain is going to promote the integration of industry and finance. The panelists are Wang Haiming, Director of China COSCO Shipping Group Company Limited, and Li Yubing, Deputy General Manager of China Merchants Port Group Company Limited, and Ms. Yuan Rui, Deputy General Manager of Transaction Banking Department of Shanghai Pudong Development Bank Co. Company Limited, and Wang Haiyun, Assistant to General Manager of Transaction Banking Department of China Citibank, and Wu Wenxing, Chief Technology Officer, Intel Industry Solutions Group, and also Lin Yifei, the Vice President of the Intelligent Technology BU of N Group and the General Manager of the Strategic Customer Department. And now the floor is yours. We're going to see the panel discussion and hear insights from you all. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lin Yifei from Ant Group. As we talk about blockchain, the panelists today, they are from different walks of life and try to build connections among different industries. We got two representatives from industries like COSCO as well as China Merchants Port Group Company Limited, and also two from banks like Shanghai Pudong Development Bank Company Limited and Citibank, and also another one from another enterprise representing Intel. And we're now talking about how blockchain will really promote the integration of industry and finance. That's the core topic of our roundtable discussion. And is there anything you would like to share in your own practice? That's the first question.
First of all, I want to thank Ant Group for inviting China COSCO Shipping Group Company Limited so that we can learn from many advanced internet and technological companies. For a traditional industry, how can we catalyze the fusion of industry and finance? So there are many data that I want to share. In 2019, our global e-commerce trade volume totally achieved 18 trillion. US dollars. So what does that mean? That is slightly lower than the GDP of US, and the GDP of China was 14 trillion US dollars. And this year, because of the impact of COVID-19, the trade volume would be slightly decreased. But you all know that shipping, especially marine shipping, that about 90% are shipped across the seas, and about 75% of the total value of the commerce are shipped across the seas. So it means that it's closely linked to financial industry. Of course, for COSCO Shipping Group, we would say that in China, we have about 1,350 ships and more than 100 million shipping power, and ranking number 1 in China. And the last year, we actually shipped about 130 million tons, 1.3 billion tons. And that is how we are closely linked to financial industry. And for a traditional industry like this, what we are familiar with is a physical transform or transit of products, like moving products from one country to another country. And behind this, it means also a transfer of data and information. And this is a cross-border e-commerce. That 18 trillion US dollars represents the flow of money and also the flow of data. Everything is interconnected. That's how we constitute the trade of this entire global trade. And from Ant Group's perspective, maybe when we talk about blockchain, how can we integrate all those things? How can we make sure that those data can be moved onto blockchain? Everything can be traced and everything is transparent. And for the trade payment system, This will cause huge impact and bring transformative changes. I believe Costco, after building this relationship with Ant Group, we have already realized this, and in 2018, we jointly built this shipping alliance together. Now we're going through some of the approval process by the US and by the EU. The aim of this alliance is to address the pain points of our industry and try to solve it with blockchain technology. And with this kind of like flow of information and goods, and also the flow of money, everything can be integrated and combined, and it will become more reliable, convenient, and more secure.
Thank you. And it's all about the freight transportation being transformed into the transformation of finance in the world.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I also want to say a big thank you to Ant Group for inviting me. And now kind of like a celebrity online after this partnership with Ant Group. We all know talk about Ant Chain everywhere. And we at China Merchants Port Group, we talk about blockchain all the time. And as Mr. Lin just mentioned, because we also are a traditional industry, and for us, when we talk about innovation, it has something to do with the tangible demands. It has to be about addressing pain points. How can we integrate industries and finance? We are still exploring. And I myself want to raise some questions. Maybe we can talk about them, discuss together first. In international and national trade, what is the trend? From the port perspective, I believe Mr. Wang will feel the same way, that for our shipping industry, we're a service industry, we serve e-commerce, international commerce and national commerce. And in the past few years, with the development of digital economy, that e-commerce is rapidly developing, and trade is getting more and more fragmented. The trend is very obvious. And for us as a service industry, how can we serve better those fragmented demands? That is the key challenge that we have. And in the past, it could be like hundreds of thousands of like orders, but now it's like only dozens of goods in one batch of deal. And now it's more flexible. We need to provide flexible and even fragmented solution. That's the problem, or a trend that we have, I would say. And there are many pain points. For instance, for us at China Merchants Port Group, for instance, our port in Shenzhen. So on the port, we have like tens of thousands of participants. They are small and micro enterprises. For them, you need to know their pain points. One is about the money, what they should pay forefront. And for instance, in the West, we have about 6 million orders and different like batches of truck. And a lot of small and medium enterprises that only have like credit loans and shipping loans and goods loans. They have to pay 15 billion forefront to pay advance. So for that, that's a huge pressure. It's only 2 months and 6 months of billing period. That is a huge pressure on their shoulder. And third is about financing. And for small and medium enterprises, SMEs, we know there are a lot of like financial experts here. For those SMEs, when they do not have a very solid credit history and do not have an in-depth analysis for them, it's very difficult for them to get the finance or to get the assets they need. With blockchain, after listening to so many experts' sharings, I think blockchain is definitely an infrastructure technology. Via this digital capability, we can use address those pinpoint and make the fragmented deals possible. That is why we think we can do together or explore together with Intergroup. We're still on the way.
Thank you. Indeed, for fragmented demand from e-commerce, it's obvious there for us to see. Right now, we do need to establish a sound mechanism of SME to join hands with ports company to build trust at the same time. When the trust is there, as I've just talked about, the fusion of industries and finance, the model will be born. And then the next speaker, let's just go back to the same question. Driven by the new blockchain technology, especially given the status quo, we see the integration of industries as well as finance. What is the practice there at your bank?
So for finance, the nature is about serve the tangible economy. So we had two speakers from enterprises. I could feel that those industries have huge demand from financial sector. So for all industries were going through the digital transformation. And it's also a huge trend toward the Internet of Things and of all the new transformation. And now, we have three aspects in terms of all those innovations. First is the content of service. We need to base our credit decision on scenarios. When we evaluate those enterprises, we need to combine or consider all those detailed information based on each scenario. That is what those are the works that banks need to do. And second, when integrating between industries and banks, we need to make sure that it's all integrated and embedded by using API and other integrative technologies. Banks need to be the indispensable link in this entire service chain. And with those different touching points, we need to address the demands of the industries. And with those new technologies, we need to empower them and upgrade the new models. And the third is about the service model. We need to change that as well because industries and enterprises, they are going through digital transformation. And for us, we also need to interact with them and base all our interactions on technology, including the risk control and digital product design. Only by doing that can we better interact with them.
Thank you, Ms. Yuan. And from finance industry, we can have a different view about the industrial development. We need to see more scenarios and to diversify our service. And by identifying critical nodes, we're going to further empower industries in return as well. And we feel like it's a good idea. Then what about Mr. Wang from Citibank? Then Ms. Yuan has talked about the situation from her own bank. And for Mr. Li, we need to resolve the issue of the great cost of financing. As a matter of fact, the core question raised by MC was about the integration of industries and finance, especially given the digitalization trend. How should we do the integration? And as for Citibank, we are actually started to do that about 20 years ago to do the fusion of industries and finance. At that time, there was no such advanced technologies like blockchain. At that time, we focused on 4 industries: steel, vehicles, energy, and home appliance, altogether 4 industries. And the largest financing amount reached 700 billion RMB. And now we're moving into a new normal. And now we decided to focus on 10 industries like architecture, healthcare, FMCG, and also big commodities and logistics related products. And we are now working on 8 walks of life in total. And with development of technologies, of course, we're going to expand. the scope of them. And in terms of innovations, of fusion of industries and finance at our bank, basically there are 3 points I'd like to share with you. First of all, it's about this content as well as the object of service. In the past, we focus on individuals, but now we focus on the big picture, that is the large industry. That is to give them scenarios. That is how to cut into a scenario, how to do procurement, selling, logistics, as well as delivery. And for every scenario, we would like to really help the users to resolve some of the practical problems in financing. And secondly, or more importantly, is about building platform. Why we talk about blockchain? I feel like it bears greater importance towards platform-based finance. And now we're working with Ant Group to roll out payments as well as receivable chains in parallel. And after they got the payment, they can actually deliver that to the upper level supplier. And for some big companies, they do not need financing. And as for layer 2 and 3 enterprises, they need financing. And for any level of supplier, as long as there is credential from their they will be able to come to our bank to get the loans or do the financing work. And we do need to have to go through the verification, authorization anymore, and we can only just do the loans and give loans to them in a couple of seconds. And it's all about platform-related work. It's not just about one industry. It's all about combining them into one and combining all the players from the downstream, upstream, as well as middle stream together. We feel like that's another difference. And secondly, the way of providing service changes. And now we're moving from offline to online and being really automated. It's simple. And now you have your personal banking on your mobile devices, but for enterprise, it's not that easy. For enterprise online banking, what we need to do is to check the balance or do the transfer. But in recent years, we can do some complicated functions, for example, financing and supply chain and international settlement for enterprises. And it's not just about being online. It can be also done in automated manner. And when we see the application form, and the bank still needs to operate that offline, and then it might take 2 to 3 days for you to get the loan eventually, and you will really have to check your credit and to really go to the agreement, the contract, to go to different institutions to do the verification process. But nowadays, they are no longer necessary because everything can be done online. Just click your mouse, and within a couple of seconds, you'll be able to receive the money. Why so? Because with the development of big data as well as internet technology, we can do that. After we receive the application, we can just connect that with banks, the court, or other regulatory parties and ask the robots to do the verification, and therefore for bringing online in an automated manner is a new trend. And thirdly, it's about the changes in our philosophy in risk management. As a matter of fact, we are all focusing on risk management for banks. Why financing is so difficult? Because the risk is there. But with the development of technologies, we are now trying to explore new ways of doing that. For big companies, we just need to take a look at their balance sheet. But when it comes to SME, they don't have sheets like this. Therefore, we just need to see the digital scenario as well as product logics. And for some financial logics, of course, sometimes it's not that important. And for the other two, we don't really have to really look at them anymore because we got these two chains being rolled out all at the same time in parallel. Basically, that's what I want to talk about.
Okay, you mentioned 3 points, actually, who we serve, how we serve, and how can we manage the risks. Definitely, in terms of how we move everything online, we could make sure we can make everything tangible. And from the scenarios perspective, we can empower our capability. And also, Mr. Wu from Intel, you're from the tech industry. We would like to hear about what is your opinion.
First of all, thank you, Mr. Lee, and thank Ant Financial for your great support for enterprise. finance and technologies are important. They are the dual drivers for the development of enterprises. For finance and technology, as well as the integration of the two, we are going to see a lot of innovations out of it. As a tech company, we're going to see that users are glad to use our products. And as for SME clients, the problem for them is that they use PC to do a lot of operation and digitalized work in their daily life. But it is exactly those PC that bring a lot of inconvenience for them for operation and maintenance and even for procurement. Since it's investment in fixed assets, the cost can be sometimes high and there are a lot of difficulties as well. And we are seeing that. And for Intel, we do hope that an increasing number of users are going to use PC. And in that regard, how we're going to help them to resolve all those problems. And the National Information Center has released those figures right at this moment. For the leasing of PC has only like 5% of penetration rate, but the figure in European countries or America was about 50%. According to the center's predictions, about in 2027, the leasing rate of PC in China was about 37%. And through leasing of PC, I would say it's a good way of doing that. But for leasing companies, when they come across a problem like this, they feel like they need to invest in the first place and to acquire those PCs so that they will be able to do the leasing. But when they are going to do the procurement, they need financing, and usually they are SME, then how will they be able to get the financing in the first place? Then after they lease PCs, is there any good way for them to trace those PCs and to know the conditions of PCs? What if some leasers simply go bankrupt and they wouldn't be able to get the PCs back? So that is the reason why we are now working with a group to see if it is really a good industry. Is it a very good example of integration of industries and finance? And we have good practice in this regard as well.
Great. With technologies, we could address the pain points of the SMEs and we give them a new way of production. Speaking about technology, I want to go to our second question of the day. I just really want to know that when technology becomes a new production method, we have blockchain, 5G, IoT, and other new technologies. I want to know that, do you think technology will reshape the relationship between people and people with enterprises and between enterprises and enterprises? If it is so, then maybe technology will create new assets, no matter it's from the enterprise or industry's perspective or finance perspective or technology perspective. First of all, I want to ask Mr. Yuan, your opinion. What is your opinion? Sorry, Ms. Yuan Rui. I think with blockchain technologies, you could see that the relationship between people and enterprises and the credit relation will further enhanced. So for instance, how a bank views an enterprise, how we evaluate that. So actually a balance sheet may not be enough from a bank's perspective. It's not enough for us to judge whether that enterprise or a company is credible. And now we have all sorts of, like, in terms of their stock management and the sales and orders and everything. And we need to maybe take into consideration more elements, not just the balance sheet or the financial statement. So when we have all those data, we have the untamperable distributed bill keeping, and with multiple parties involved, it's easier to build the trust. With blockchain as the most representative data, it combines 5G, IoT, and some other fintech technologies. It makes information and technology more certain and traceable, and it cannot be tampered or changed. I believe in the future, blockchain will create new assets.
And from your description, we can tell that through some new technologies, we will be able to digitalize our description of assets. And based on that, we'll be able to stand a chance to build a math model to evaluate the risk. And when the risk evaluation can be done, then we'll be able to do things very properly. Thank you for your description. Then what about China City Bank? And you have been working in this regard for 20 years. What's your idea?
I want to share with you some of our practices or what we put into reality. For instance, fintech, how to use fintech to integrate industries and finance. For instance, Mr. Jiang mentioned earlier, how can we transform into digital economy? That's the mainstream. And also, as the representative from SPDB also mentioned, that this is our strategy now in the finance industry. So for China City Bank, we hired a lot of from Baidu and Alibaba and maybe Tencent, sort of famous BAT talents. We could see that we need to address the issues of trust. I want to talk about 3 implementations first. So NLP technology, so that's the natural language processing. How can the machine understand a human's language? That's how we address the trust issue. All our financial institutions, we need to obey the rules of our CBRC. And now with machine, we could make sure that, for instance, when we check our 发票, the so-called VAT in China, we can now check, for instance, the contracts. For instance, 发票is more kind of like a formalized way of putting things together, but contracts are more important and complicated. Now we can even train our machine to read the contracts and approve the contracts. Now our machines can read both, and with block and blockchain, and when companies try to get loans from us, we could approve those loans in seconds. That is how we can use machine to read all those information on the contracts. That's the first implementation. The second is graph computation. So graph computation is a widely used technology. You use this kind of technology to connect use this graph to demonstrate their relationship. It's mainly for risk control. For instance, we have a lot of enterprises, especially private enterprises. We need to analyze the data and analyze the data and tell whether they are at any risk of breaching the contract. And if there is any risk involved, we could lower our loss and avoid our loss. And with those new technologies, we could even help them enhance their risk management. And the third technology is blockchain, which is also the topic of today. It's a hard topic, and also it has been here for many years. And now President Xi even hosted a blockchain conference last year in October. So now you could see that there are still three sub-points I would like to mention. First is that without Bitcoin, you would not know blockchain entirely, I would say. The Bitcoin makes it possible for us to use blockchain technology. It do not mean that blockchain is not important, but I would say that it is important for us to know where shall we use blockchain and how can we make it scalable. That's why we constantly talk about scenarios. And for instance, the integration of Yangtze River data and the interconnectivity of the QR code in the metro system. And from this perspective, from actually the bank's perspective, blockchain's application is not the only thing. For instance, the cold chain storage, the data storage on the chain, but also some other technology, as Mr. Zhou and also Mr. Yuan from PBOC mentioned that it's about trust issue. And now we also have the encryption technology. And the third is the smart contract, because blockchain technology is all about the data. about data storage and how can we make the business smoother and make it more convenient and more trade accessible. I also want to give you an example. Like for instance, the Dual Chain Connect, like maybe like early this year or late last year, it was about the Xiong'an district. It's a giant plan that will last a millennium, that raised by the central government. That we have like the government and also the major enterprises. They told us that they want everything to be transparent and tangible, that everything has high traceability. So in that case, we provide Xiong'an district government a new system that will help them to do all the settlement. We have done the bidding, and China CITIC won the case.
Right, NLP and then graph computing. And thirdly, about the introduction and use of blockchain technologies to really achieve China Citibank's fusion of industries and finance. And then what about Intel as a tech company? Then in your view, how you're going to make full use of technologies to create new assets? I feel like yes. And for technologies, they are increasingly adopted by enterprises. And you should know that as the example of PC, it used to be a tool only, but PCs has gradually become an asset of individuals in recent years. And through PC, we're going to understand its use in conditions through IT technology, and gradually they will all be transformed into digitalized asset. And besides PC, there are all kinds of digitalized information at companies, and they will all become assets. And as for digitalized assets, will be able to be using transaction. But as for transaction, is there anything we can do to promote traceability? And we feel like blockchain really resolve the trust issue in transaction for us. But in addition, in the entire transaction process, there's all kinds of problems we need to resolve. For example, for what kind of targeted user group, we need to do different things. And in order to do that, we need to have users portrayed and to get their own behavior patterns on our chain and try to provide tailored service to each one of them. And also, we're going to do risk management as well. In the entire transaction, there might be risky behavior. And on that point, we do need to make full use of AI algorithm to capture risky behaviors and relevant problems. And when it comes to design of product and service, we'll take all of them into consideration. And therefore, besides blockchain technology, there will be more AI-related or Internet of Things technologies. It's all about rolling out a whole package of technology as a service and really try to create an environment for virtual asset and try to put them into transaction as well. And in your view, science and technology is not just about empowerment, it's also building the bridge of industries and finance. And now let's take a look at insights from representatives of different industries. And according to the previous speakers, new technologies are surely be able to create new things in industries. There are two questions for you then. Then in your industries, what is the role played by science and technology in your industry? And I particularly like your philosophy at your company for we deliver value and we connect world from both of you respectively. Then in my view, be it for shipping or ports industry, it's all about building trust be it for overseas operation or foreign trade or domestic trade. It's all about building trust with each other. Then for shipping and ports industry, could you please give us some examples of changes brought by blockchain technologies? Now I would like to ask each one of you. Mr. Wang, please.
So actually, we deliver value is what we believe and China Costco Shipping Group. So for us, it's definitely natural for us to adopt a blockchain. We face a lot of challenges, we have a lot of pain points, and when we deliver goods to our customers, it's kind of like we promise a value. We need to earn the trust of customers. There has to be a system before the trust. There are a lot of pain points in the supply chain. For instance, the different settlement, different bills, and different documents. They're just so complicated, and everything is different. And everyone has its own requirements. And when we cross border, the requirements are even getting more and more complex. So, for instance, in international trade, we have 18 trillion USD volume. But most of them, they are still using this kind of letter of credit. So why do we use letter of credit? It's because we do not trust each other. The buyers and the sellers, they do not have trust. And we need to have the shipping industry or shipping enterprise to provide a paper, a letter of credit to prove that what is the quantity of the product and how long will the product will be shipped. That is what we call BNL or bill of lading in the shipping industry. So this is kind of like a lack of trust is everywhere. So we want to make sure that all blockchain participants, including buyers, sellers, and banks, insurance companies, and the entire financial institution and financial sector, and also the ports, there has to be a trust. So with the blockchain, we have this opportunity to make sure the supply chain of international trade to be trustworthy, to be more accurate, and to be smoother. So for instance, with blockchain's widely application in international trade, it will definitely bring new breakthroughs in terms of everything, how everything evolves. And now all of the rules, it's kind of like Hamburg, and also the Hague rules. And China is a huge shipping country, but we do not have a complete set of rules. But we believe that in the future, with the advancement of blockchain, we will have more rules set by China. As Mr. Jiang and Ms. Yuan from Hangzhou just mentioned, that when talking about cross-border trade, it's just so complicated. What will come to your mind is complicated. But with blockchain, everything will become easier. And that is the topic of today. Because we trust each other, everything will be easier. So trust makes everything simple. So for a supply chain, it makes international trade easier. And blockchain is not something that we will achieve in one day. It's kind of Rome is not built in a day. We need to have data. And for our company and for many companies like us, we need to build our system, a robust system. We have accumulated 20 years of data, and now with all this data, moved on to blockchain, integrated with IoT and 5G. It will make everything smoother and more trustworthy. And in the future, it will be easier for everyone.
Thank you. And through blockchain technology, there will be trust. Maybe in the future, we're going to deliver value together. And then, what about Mr. Lee?
I cannot agree more. Trust makes everything easier. It's kind of like a slogan or a company philosophy at Ant Group. I believe technology, blockchain as the most representative one of the most representative ones. We are building a new trust system, and with this trust system, it's of paramount importance to every business. And when we build this system, it plays different roles. For instance, IoT, Internet of Things. It is about whether the data is real, the genuinity or tangibility of physical world. It gives you the real data. That's the most important thing. And for 5G, it addresses the speed of data transformation. Without 5G, you cannot guarantee the timeliness of data transformation, data transfer. And the third, blockchain, things cannot be tampered or changed on the chain, because once it's off the chain, it's always there. And also, even with all those technologies, we cannot achieve much things without AI, because AI brings new value. So maybe in the future, all those new technologies will play its own role and be complementary in building a new trust system. That is question one. I definitely agree it will create a new data asset. And second, for our industry, the port industry. So for China Merchants Port Group, we are a leading player in our industry. Among the 50 ports in over 260 countries in 5 continents, we are definitely leading the industry. We connect the world, as our slogan says. That is about connectiveness. And Mr. Jiang emphasized the concept of connection, because connection creates value. And for each port, it is the core link of international commerce, and is a very important infrastructure in terms of international shipping. And there are a lot of eco-partners taking their own role, and they each has a very important ecosystem, many kind of like small ecosystem building into a larger one. And behind that, there's a supply chain. So different ports, they connect with each other. There's an interconnectivity going on. It addresses the issue of different dimensions. And also with data connection, that's how we address the issue of the network. All the different nodes are connected together. So I believe this creates a natural network based on data. So that is where we have the different points, different data points, and different dimensions, and then onto the network. For us at China Merchants Port, we're using ports as the natural traffic integrated physical locus, and building this kind of all the way from the tangible economy to a value economy. So our logistics service platform for any port, like for instance Shenzhen port, there's over trillions of volumes, trade volumes in any port. How can we make sure that traffic economy will become the trade volume-based or value-based economy? That means that we need to make sure we use those measures effectively.
Therefore, it's from point to line and to the entire network. And through the overall technologies, we're going to build trust from freight to value from ports to the overall logistics network. And this is actually the idea from Mr. Lee. And now another rather challenging question, baffling question to the representatives from bank. Then in your view, based on blockchain or trust, what will be the most innovative product in the future? Let's start from Ms. Yuan. In fact, for finance, it serves industries, and the asset of the industries will be in the form of transfer of capital, and there will be all kinds of ideas like accounts receivable and accounts payable, all kinds of concepts like this. And in recent years, maybe we can focus on a case of cooperation with Ant Group. For example, for all the data of orders as well as shipment will be brought on the chain. And on this chain, the state, the progress of this information will be displayed, and banks will be able to do the design for financial assets. And in recent years, we're working with digital logistics BU of Ant Group to really work on the different scenarios, for example, supply chain and logistics. And we're now trying to do innovation in financial products based on blockchain technology. And this allows us to know that there's no fixed assets, but there are a lot of accounts receivable and all kinds of digital assets as well. And from this case, maybe for commercial banks as well as operation in the future, there will be more data brought on the chain, and there will be more digital assets being formed. And on top of those, we're going to do innovative applications.
So from Ms. Yuan's perspective, you already have a lot of technologies putting into practice, including like on the road and even in the air. So everything like the assets actually can be put into practice, and not only from the enterprise's perspective, but individual finance as well. So now, please, Mr. Wan.
Thank you for your question. The most valuable digital asset in our view is like accounts receivable and accounts payable. And when we are going to work with the dual chain connect, we try to make these two into digital assets. And when we are doing that, we're not only working with dual chain connect, and we're working with other partners as well. And for some core enterprises, they will try to set up their own digitalized accounts payable and receivable platform, and maybe they were just using your blockchain technology. That's possible. But as for technologies like this, we have served more than 200 enterprises already and over 2,000 SME. And as for financing volume, is around, since last year, the figure was about within 1 million, and the overall volume was about 100 trillion. And then, what about the documents of warehouse and orders? And last week, I went to Shanghai Futures Exchange, and they got their own orders as well as relevant document system, and they can only work on the documents themselves and without using blockchain. Maybe next time I visit them again, I can recommend them to bring everything on to the chain, and in that way they got more diversified application scenarios.
Thank you. Another follow-up question, because we better or very good at standard products, but if we jump out of the box, for instance, what we are doing now based on patents and artworks, or what we just saw based on the ceramic products from Jingdezhen, from the Jingde town. From finance perspective, from bank's perspective, all those artworks, even space artworks, do you think they can be turned into assets?
Indeed, in industries, for art works, we're trying to do exploration in terms of traceability, but as for financial application, I feel like there are two things we need to do. First of all, about digital assets ownership issue and the confirmation of the right of ownership, as well as the relevant rules regulations that are waiting to be perfected. And besides, for non-standardized assets, there's no institutional reference for us to do the pricing of that. Then in terms of our practice, in the future, especially in terms of institutional arrangements, we do need to make clear about the ownership and the confirmation of the right of ownership in transaction, as well as the pricing of that. If there's improvements in legislation, then I believe they will be a very good asset to banks.
So it's a very challenging question, I would say. Not so many banks have had the explorations, but yes, indeed, some banks are doing some of similar explorations in terms of how we turn artwork into assets, but it's not a commercialized trend. From the technical perspective, maybe we can address some of the issues, but it's not a panacea. So, as Ms. Yuanrui mentioned, that IoT. So, of course, as our guest speakers also mentioned, that different technologies like IoT, 5G, and blockchain, they are addressing different problems. Also, when we evaluate those assets, it's another thing for us to identify whether those evaluation is recognized by banks. And also, we need to be able to monetize those technologies. Otherwise, if we cannot monetize them, it is impossible for us to put those technologies into practice. And in different countries, and whether we have the more mature technologies, that would be a better way to try it out.
Thank you. I asked this question simply because I saw our work as well as their IP, even if they're not in circulation for banks, but for a lot of us, we are passing through all kinds of IP as well as digital copyright. And I believe you have done a lot at Ant Group as well. And when we see all kinds of assets, what kind of empowerment can we get from technologies? And one last question. Today, we're in September of 2020, and now maybe we can use your wide imagination to predict the next 5 years' development. What about the September in 2025? What would you say to the future version of you at that time? Just one sentence, please.
Well, for our shipping industry, if you want to build yourself into a great company, you need to know how to define your future. At Costco China, we have a slogan called "We are ready." So it means that we're getting prepared and we're getting ready to collaborate with our partners and embrace digital economy. With our collaboration, I believe that only by concerted efforts can we build this kind of synergy in blockchain. We need to combine all those, or even join hands to integrate it into an alliance to serve all participants. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel like we have a very fruitful discussion today. And from China Merchants Port, looking into the next 5 years, we feel like it will witness fast development and great changes. We hope that in the future, science and technology will empower industry, while at the same time, big data will become a carrier for us to build an open and inclusive community, as indicated by the conference name, Inclusion, to be open, inclusive, and truly smart. Inclusive based on sharing practices, so that all the participants and stakeholders, including all the enterprises, will be benefiting from those.
Okay, I believe in the next 5 years there will be more data moving onto the chain. From bank's perspective, the data is on the chain, risk control is there, financing is also there. That is what we need to be aiming at, especially when we try to build an inclusive finance. Put it into one sentence. I would say, as Jeff mentioned, that blockchain addresses the issue first.
Then what about Mr. Huang? In my view, maybe 5 years later, let's just be brave. We feel like the most important thing is about smart banks empowering real economies. We got 5G, internet, IoT, big data, cloud computing, blockchain, all kinds of technologies, you name it. But only AI could have the potential to fundamentally change everything we have here. In the next 5 years, the wide application of AI will change our ways of providing service as well as our operation philosophy. Maybe I can quote a sentence in car industry. When we're having the smart driving industry, people say it's illegal for people to drive cars. Only PC could control vehicles. But it makes sense because people can get tired, they can be drunk before they're driving their cars. Therefore, machines are only the legitimate parties to drive that. But maybe in 5 years, only machines can do the verification instead of human beings, because human beings have their emotional weakness. They might be subject to all kinds of risk and pressure, and they may have biased views towards different client groups. And through wild imagination, I believe smart banking will be born.
I thought it was about illegal. I thought it would be about like it's illegal for men to run any banks. Fortunately, it's about vehicles. Okay, I want to say that in the next 5 years, we need to start from today. So now a lot of tech companies, they are helping traditional industry and financial industries to transform into a digital economy. And in the future, how can we make sure that we can leverage all those technologies' power? I believe that all those technology companies can do more. And on that day, we will have a solid infrastructure for everything to become digitalized. And with trustable transaction, everything will be more reliable.
And maybe for me myself, we feel like anti-groups has its own idea, that is, because of trust, everything will be made easy. Today, thank you for your participation in the roundtable discussion from different walks of life. And according to your ideas, we'll be able to see the development path of the industry, and we are now combining ourselves with fintech, especially blockchain technology, and based on trust, we're going to achieve even greater level of fusion of ancient industries and finance and to have more to come in the future. And that's it for today's discussion.
为嘉宾的
Thank you, distinguished guests.